Hi, Christian. It's great to have you in Bangalore. And, I think we've been working together now for almost 3 years. And um, it's probably a good time to reflect on the journey so far. So it makes me think about how we got started and um, why decentralization? Why of sewage? Why do you think that's an interesting space to be in? And can you tell me a little bit about what attracted you to this?
Yeah, it's really nice to be back, Shreya, in Bangalore. I think this is the most interesting city when you think about decentralized water use and what it can do to help cities create new water sources. So actually, I've been working on this for a long time, and I need to go back to the origins of the idea why this could be interesting to pursue. And that's really about thinking what solutions we have in our cities to manage water. And if you look at it, then basically we have one solution globally that was developed 2,000 years ago, and it's still the same system. So we take water somewhere, we bring it into the city, turn it into a waste stream, and then treat it somewhere and eventually release it back into nature. And so this has worked for a long time in many sort of contexts, but it doesn't really solve the problems that exist today, or at least in some parts, it can't really cover the problems that exist. And I think Bengaluru is a really nice example of a city which is really quickly growing, has a lot of water scarcity. And so it's really hard to build a centralized infrastructure while the city is booming in such a way that it really works, that it has the right sort of dimensions, and that it's really hard to finance this. So basically, the centralized systems are really sort of slow moving, sturdy solutions. And here you need a solution that's much more flexible, adaptable to changing context. And so that's a context where this decentralized approach makes a lot of sense. And so EAWAG has been working on this for 20 years or more, and in different projects. And now this is the first time where we have a city where this is really scaled up. So there's more than 3,000 systems installed in the city. So it's a unique real world lab in a way to figure out how could you really make this work and sort of create a solution that works for fast growing cities around the world.
That's really interesting. And do you think that this approach to decentralization is only happening in the developing world, or do you see countries and cities that where we think that these kind of problems are solved, actually rethinking their approach?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting question. I think it's not just a sort of developing or a low or middle income sort of country solution, but it's also happening in developed economies. So we see projects that look quite similar in San Francisco, across Europe, in Japan, in China. So it's really a solution that, of course, has a lot of sort of opportunities if you're in a fast growing, sort of booming city. But it's also useful if you're like in a city like San Francisco, which has a well-established centralized system, but no space to expand the big treatment plants. And if the city still wants to grow, then this is like a nice way to create water sanitation infrastructure without needing to change the centralized system. So you cut on costs that would be needed to expand the centralized system, for example. Or you can create a new water source. So that's the main ambition in many places that already have centralized infrastructures, that you can add decentralized reuse as an option to create a new water source for the city that's really drought resilient.
Yeah.
So there's a different motivation, I would say, to why this could make sense in different contexts.
Yeah. I think in the context of Bangalore, the drought resilience that you speak of is so important because, especially with the recent water crisis that we had, I think we really need to look at different solutions. But I think in Bangalore, one of the key problems we have is the utility is so underfunded. And with the large centralized plants, you have these sewer networks that you need to lay down retrospectively, which makes them not only really expensive to do but challenging, but also 75% of the cost of sewage treatment is in the sewer network. So why do you think decentralization was interesting in the context of Bangalore? What was unique about the case that's happening here?
I think Bengaluru is really interesting because you could see it was really a prime example of a city that's growing too fast to really plan a centralized system that works. And so it was really hard to plan up front where the city would grow, how fast, how big. So it was just inherently impossible to then design a centralized system in a good way. So here then, with this, I think this decentralized approach was a very pragmatic solution to deal with this problem. And we've seen this in many other places, like Beijing, when it was booming, had a similar approach. As I said, there's other cities around the world that went into a similar sort of direction. And so what's unique here, I think, is that it's also combined with a very strong water scarcity problem. So I think in essence, the city doesn't have enough sort of water supplies from other sources, from like Kaveri River water, from rainwater, from like the bore wells. If you add it all up, it's still not enough for a city that will keep booming in the next 10 years. So in a way, there was no way around making decentralized water use work, and that's really unique, I think. And also the scale at which has already diffused, so more than 3,000 systems, doesn't exist anywhere else. And so in that sense, it's really, globally unique place to think about how to make this work better.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. And I also wonder, I mean, do you see anything unique in terms of technology or business innovation which you haven't come across in other parts of the world?
Yeah, that's actually, it's really the most interesting place in that sense that there's really unique innovation that I've not seen anywhere else. So one thing is that actually treated wastewater can be sold to offsite markets. So that's, I've not seen this anywhere else in this fashion. So basically an RWA treating its wastewater and then selling it to a customer in the neighborhood, a laundry or an industrial plant or a construction site, and that's being legalized, and that's really sort of a business models are being created around this solution, sort of a micro market for treated wastewater that does not happen anywhere else yet. And also in the direct on-site reuse space, there's quite interesting projects that are happening where the water is treated to really high standards. So you can use it for swimming pools, in 2 cases, even for drinking. That's also really sort of cutting edge sort of solutions that are not being deployed in many other parts of the world yet.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really nice to see the positive take that you have on the business innovation side of things. As a resident of the city, though, I think when there was this water crisis, even though people had STPs, they were still struggling with water. In your experience as someone who studies transitions, how long do you think it takes for these kind of innovative solutions to diffuse? And are there any parallels that you can draw from other spaces?
Mhm. Yeah, so when you think about sort of mainstreaming this decentralized water use sort of approach, then you need to be aware of what type of innovation we are talking about here. And this is not an incremental innovation that you can put into a sort of a mass market and scale directly. So it's not like a new smartphone model that you just put into an existing market and then the whole world will start using it in 1 year. But this is really a sort of a transformative innovation where you would completely change the main paradigm in your sector, the type of solution, how the sector works. It all gets reshuffled. And so this means you need to do sort of technology development, technological innovation, but you also need to change regulations. You need to change sort of user attitudes, create new sort of business models, new sort of storylines, why this actually makes sense and is legitimate. And there are parallels. So you can think about a lot of similar transitions in the past, like the shift from horses to cars, or from fossil fuel energy to renewable energies, or from sailing ships to steamships. And it always takes 60 years to get from the old sort of way of doing things to the new one and really transform a sector or establish a new solution in the sector, let's put it like that. And so that's what we're dealing with. And it feels like we're halfway now. So we have spent about 10, 20, 30 years developing the technologies, solutions that could make this work, but we still haven't created the ecosystem around the technologies that could really make it a safe practice with regulative frameworks, investment models, business models, and sort of user acceptance. That's all needed to really make it work. And we're still working on that now. And that's really what we see in the city are the key challenges are in these fields now.
Yeah. Do you think there are any ways to catalyze that transformation? And is there any way to work with the ecosystem to perhaps show them alternate pathways that they could take? And what do you think is, something that we as researchers, well, you as a researcher and us as an innovation lab, what could we do together to actually catalyze this transition?
Yeah, so in these situations, what you have to do is to create a supportive innovation ecosystem. So you bring the right actors together around this new solution, and then you make them deliberate about, okay, what are the key bottlenecks that hinder this idea from really working well, providing safe, reliable, high quality water in an affordable way, right? And so you can solve it as a single organization, as a researcher, but you need to bring the right people together and sort of engage them in the right type of dialogues that they can sort out jointly, okay, what are key interventions that we can take together, not one actor alone, but as an ecosystem, what are the key bottlenecks we can really tackle if we sort of move strategically. So this could be developing a new sort of quality label for high quality reuse solutions that then the industry itself sort of establishes and pushes. Or it could be that you create a sort of a tool that helps the RWAs, like the dwellers in the city, to find out which system might fit their needs best. Or you work with regulators about how a regulative framework could be established. But it's always different actors from an ecosystem that need to do this together. And that's what we try to spur also with this project now in Bengaluru.
Yeah, I think the project has been really great to work on, and just seeing the approach that you have of catalyzing the ecosystem has really made us reflect on the new partnerships that we need to build. Where do you see what we learned from here scaling? How do you think that could actually scale beyond Bangalore?
So we've also thought about this in other parts of the world, and this mainstreaming is really the hard part. So that's
Yeah.
going to be the next 10, 20, 30 years, where you need to work together in a strategic way to make this happen. And you need to be aware of the scale of the challenge. It's like a long-term thing, and probably move step by step. So let's say identify one or two key bottlenecks that currently hinder this from sort of working better, diffusing more widely, tackle them with sort of targeted groups of actors that can work on these problems, and then take the next step from there. Maybe also move from one niche market to a slightly larger sort of test market, and then ultimately to a big mass market, and then ultimately also to a very affordable solution that can then scale very quickly around the world.
Yeah.
But this is a multi-step sort of long-term process, I would say.
Yeah, but I think that unlocks several possibilities, right? Because drought resilience is one, and then we could also, in a developing city like Bangalore, maybe prevent pollution of lakes because sewage treatment is built in tandem with the new construction. And I think that's a really exciting future if we could actually, achieve that kind of mainstreaming. So, thank you so much for talking to us today, Christian, and it's great to have you in Bangalore, and we hope to see you soon again.
Yeah, thanks to you. It's a real privilege to be in this project with you and everybody else. It's really
Yeah.
interesting.